The floodgates are opening. I have a feeling that within a few years, video game adaptations are going to become what superheroes became way back in 2008. I mean, this year alone, we've already got Sonic 2, Uncharted, Cuphead, and Halo, with Cyberpunk, Division, and Borderlands apparently coming later in the year. And just a few days ago, I saw a movie that got my mind racing about the boiling vat of radioactive goo that is the state of video game adaptations. And that movie was, you guessed it, Ruben Fleischer's Uncharted. It's no surprise to anyone that Uncharted is about as enjoyable as a big fat wart on the bottom of your foot, but why? And why do so many adaptations like it fall so flat so often? So, to get to the bottom of this, I want to take what I think is the best video game adaptation of all time, Arcane, and stack it up against Uncharted to see why this works and this doesn't. The first thing we need to ask ourselves is a question that I think Hollywood has never once bothered to ask themselves. Does this game make sense to adapt? And when it comes to Arcane, the answer is a resounding yes. League of Legends is a game that on a surface level is very, very light on story. The gameplay side of it is just that, pure gameplay. You're not seeing any kind of story play out or any kind of character development happen while you play that game. Where the story comes into play is with the lore. You can go and read wiki pages up the wazoo about the world and the characters from League of Legends, but because all this history hasn't been shown to us in any way, there's no preconceived expectations for the way the story should be told or the way the character should be performed, and we'll come back to that later because that's really important. So this gives the people making the show just the most colossal amount of freedom to breathe life into League of Legends in a really fresh and interesting way that literally everybody can enjoy. The people who play League are going to love seeing their precious lore come to life, and the people who despise League are going to love it as well, because it's just a really good standalone story that just happens to be a League joint. League makes sense to adapt. Uncharted does not. The entire point of Uncharted as a game is that it's essentially a playable Indiana Jones. So if you take the playable part out of playable Indiana Jones, what are you left with? You're left with a product that's worse than both the source material and the inspiration. And then what's the point? You're going to have a better time watching any Indiana Jones movie or playing any Uncharted game than you're going to have watching the Uncharted movie. And because it is so story-centric, you're just going to be left with something that you're going to be comparing to the games and thinking it's just worse than the games you love. And for the people that don't play the games, they're just going to be stuck for 2 hours thinking, what is this dollar store Indiana Jones-ass, National Treasure-ass nonsense? Uncharted doesn't make sense to adapt. Arcane is a story that we've never seen told before. It follows the lore and it has characters from League of Legends, but it keeps it fresh by presenting us with a very well-structured and very well-written story that we've never seen. And in doing so, it takes away any way for us to compare it to the games, which is where I want to flip over to Uncharted. Uncharted does the exact opposite of this. Because Uncharted is a relatively story-heavy game, a lot of the movie-watching experience is going to be spent comparing the game to the movie. And for Uncharted, it's doomed from the very start, because everything they pull from the games is done way better in the games. And everything they make up themselves is less interesting than anything the games present you with. So it's just a complete disaster. The characters from League, and please don't hurt me for this, are kind of flat as hell. You can read bios and a little short story about a character to give you a baseline understanding of who they are, but it never really goes deeper than that, to my knowledge anyway. I could be wrong. And the most important thing is that there isn't a voice to the character. There is a voice actor yelling one-liners for their fights in the game.
One girl wrecking crew!
But nothing on the level of Nolan North's performance as Nathan Drake. One of the biggest things that make video game adaptations so difficult to take seriously is the lack of the iconic voice.
Where is Catulantes?
Nathan Drake isn't Nathan Drake without Nolan North. Max Payne isn't Max Payne without James McCaffrey. Agent 47 isn't Agent 47 without David Bateson. And it just, you can go on for days. Choosing to adapt a character who doesn't have an iconic voice and story behind them makes it way easier to buy them as the characters we love from the game. Uncharted does the exact opposite of this, which really disappointed me because the one thing that I was constantly giving this movie credit for up to the release was that making the movie about young Nate was genius, big brain level move. They know that Drake isn't Drake without our boy Nolan, so making it about a young, less Nolan-y version of the character is really, really clever, and I give them credit for that. And I think Tom Holland is the perfect casting for youngling Nate, I gotta say. I was very, very impressed with that line of thinking. And then I watched the movie. And one thing that I was going to give that movie credit for came crumbling down in literally the first 3 minutes. It opens on Nathan Drake in the iconic cargo plane scene from Uncharted 3. After a couple of funny haha one-liners.
Oh my god, I'm so sorry! That was purely reactive!
There's a couple of boom boom pows and a healthy amount of...
Oh crap!
It cuts to a flashback to young Drake, who, by the way, despite it being a 15-year flashback, the actor looks like 2 or 3 months younger than Tom Holland. So now that it's crammed down our throat that this is Nolan North's Drake, it introduces us to Mark Wahlberg's Sully, and it's just a complete disaster from there. If you're gonna make a movie with beloved characters with beloved voices like Nate and Sully, then you need perfect casting. And as much as I like Marky Mark and Spider-Man, they aren't it. There is, however, a way to get around the whole casting ordeal, and that's to make it... At this point, in 2022, I'm convinced that if you want a video game adaptation to work, it has to be animated. All of the best ones are Arcane, Castlevania, Mortal Kombat Legends, Street Fighter 2. A huge part of why these work as well as they do is because of how beautifully they're presented. You don't have to keep making them live action. It's okay, people like animation. Animation works because a lot of the games that are being adapted have very, very strong art direction. And giving the adaptations a team that can do the wonderful art direction justice through animation works incredibly well, like 90% of the time. Like, it's okay, people like animation. Look how well Spider-Verse did. Look how well Arcane did. So embrace it the way that Arcane did, and you'll be well on your way to a great adaptation. I don't know about you, but I would much rather look at something like this over whatever the hell is going on in the live action video game space right now. Like, what is this? There is a breathtaking chase sequence from Uncharted 4 that is unironically one of the finest action set pieces to ever grace the screen in any medium, and people recognize that, people love that, so just animate it, please, I beg you. And no disrespect to the VFX artists that work on these movies, they deserve the best. My heart goes out to them for how terribly they're treated in Hollywood specifically, but that's a whole video in itself. So, to have a good video game adaptation, I think you need 1. A game that makes sense to adapt. 2. A fresh, interesting story. 3. Characters without iconic performances behind them, or an animated film. And 4. Make it animated. Obviously, there's a lot more to it than that. You need crew that understands the tone of the game, you need directors that understand what they're adapting, but I think those 4 things are like the baseline of what you need to make a good video game adaptation. Arcane closely follows... Well, not even. Arcane crafted the blueprint for what good video game adaptations can be, and Uncharted, unfortunately, doesn't really do anything to make this adaptation work. But it's not all bad. To close this thing off, I want to end it on a nice positive note by shouting out one of my favorite movies ever. Back in March of 2020, I think it was, I wrote that The Adventures of Tintin is the closest thing we'll ever get to a good Uncharted movie, and I stand by that. Steven Spielberg, the king, the GOAT, crafted one of the best globe-trotting adventure movies that I've ever had the pleasure of laying the old peepers on. The animation is stunning. The action choreography is out of this world. There's a chase sequence near the end that solidified in my head as one of the best action scenes in history. You had an all-star cast killing it from start to finish. Jamie Bell, Daniel Craig, Andy Serkis, Nick Frost, Simon Pegg, come on! Written by Edgar Wright and Stephen Moffat, edited by Michael Kahn, composed by John Williams, and directed by Steven freaking Spielberg. You gotta be kidding me with this. It's the best movie ever made, and I think it's everything that Uncharted wanted to be. So go take a peek at Tintin. It's really, really good. And thank you so much for watching this video. I'll see you next time. I got something I'm really excited about cooking up right now. So I'll see you then. Bye bye. Oh shit.